Hi everyone, Mark Kentwell here, PRD Nationwide Director of Newcastle and Lake Macquarie offices, and I've just got another tip for you for buyers this time as part of our useful information for buyers and sellers series. We're carrying on from the friendly auction system last time that I spoke to you about. You can find that video on YouTube if you haven't seen it, and this one's about offering prior to an auction or getting ready to bid at an auction. So there's 4 quick tips here. Tip number 1 is get ready early. So that means make sure your deposit is ready. It's best to have 10% deposit, and you need to know how long it's going to take you to get it out of the bank. Some people have got it tied up in shares, fixed term accounts. They may even need a deposit bond. You need a specific answer on how many days that's going to take so that you can formulate the best offer and know when you can put that offer in. Or if it's getting ready to the auction, you want to know several days out from the auction that you've actually got access to that deposit, and talk to the agent about what deposits are acceptable. If you're asking for a lower than 10% deposit, which the friendly auction system often does allow, depending on the circumstances of the owner and the way that it's run by the solicitor, it can be done, but just organise it earlier. That's what I'd recommend there. As far as getting ready early goes, it also means being ready on finance so that you can sign an unconditional contract on the property. At some point in time, whether it's for sale or auction, you do need to sign an unconditional contract on the property. So even in for sale, you might have a cooling off period or a finance clause, but it does become binding at some point. In auction, you get ready early so that when it is time to negotiate on price, there's nothing else to negotiate or worry about. So it is a case of communicating to the agent of where you're up to on things like finances. Don't keep all your cards close to your chest, because it might make it harder for the agent to help you buy the property. If your finance isn't 100% approved as yet, provide the broker's details or the bank's details. They're more than happy to work in with the agent in most cases and informing them how long things are going to take to get through so that they can then pass it back on to the vendor. Just remember that the agent's the only person that can deal with all parties, and that's why they're employed. So we can deal with the buyer, we can deal with the seller, we can deal with the buyer's solicitor, we can deal with the seller's solicitor, can also deal with the bank, the pest inspector and the building inspector. Whereas not one of those other parties is allowed to communicate with all of the other parties. So it's best to be open and transparent, and we'll do the same for you. Tip number 2 is communicate the bracket of interest that you've got on the property so that the agent can then come back to you if there's offers or competition in that range, or if it's moving above that bracket. If the agent asks you what price you're interested in, you'll have a natural desire to tell them the lowest figure that you're interested in buying at. But it's then important that if the agent asks you if you want to be contacted back if the offers are moving above that range, for example, you might say you're interested at $475. The agent says that's fine. If I've got interest in the $5 to $525 range, would you still like to know about it, or is it definitely over and out for you on this property? That openness on communication is going to help you buy the property if it turns out that there is other interest in that range. By not telling the agent that you're interested in that range, it could well be sold to another buyer, because the owner does have the ability to sell to any buyer at any time if they feel that the offer is best for their needs and situation. It's the same with a for sale property as well. Tip number 3, if you're offering prior, make it attractive to the owner. What you're basically trying to do if you're offering prior is tempt the owner to sell prior to the auction and cancel their campaign. Now, a lot of time they've gone to the auction because it's got a fixed time frame. They like the unconditional nature of the contract, as in that there's no pest, building or finance clauses after the fact that the offer is accepted and signed. And they may be moving on with something else. They also might not have a fixed idea of price in their mind when they start off on the campaign, and the reserve is yet to be set. So you're aiming to tempt the owner to cancel their chances of selling to anyone else. Ways that you can make your offer look most attractive include have the deposit attached to the offer, or at least specified in writing what it would be and how long it would take to get. Have a contract signed and the cooling off period waived. Now, you do this only if you've sought the advice of a solicitor, which we recommend, and they shouldn't charge you for the advice. And that you'd seen the pest and building reports from a reputable company that's prepared to sign it into your name and answer your questions. It would also be if you knew that your finance was unconditional or ready to go. Now, if you can't do all that up front, or you're not willing to do all that up front, at least communicating in writing how long it would take you to get to that point. Also specify the settlement. If you're after a form on putting an offer in writing in that's not quite to the level of signing a contract, but will specify all these terms, ask your friendly auction agent. They do have those forms available for you, and it will guide you on what to fill in. And tip number 4 If your offer's not accepted prior to the auction, that doesn't mean the owner's never going to take that price. It may just mean that they weren't ready to take that price, they hadn't considered that figure yet, they hadn't set their reserve, or they hadn't set their minimum. There might be other interest showing on the property that hasn't given their final price as yet too. But a lot of the time, buyers that say they're very interested at open houses or through the first 2 weeks don't end up being in a position to bid come auction, or change their mind, or aren't ready at all. So if that's the case, what the owner may say no to prior to the auction can often be accepted on the day of auction. And in a lot of cases, there's been buyers that have made an offer prior to the auction and then refused to come and bid because they thought that if the owner's not taking that, I'm not going to buy it, and the property's actually sold for less. Now, it's obviously not the intention of the owners to sell for less. In a lot of cases, they do need to gather more information before they can decide. So sometimes your offer will tempt them to sell, and it will suit their situation to sell straight away. But if you've put your best foot forward, and I mean your best foot forward, a great offer with all the conditions we've talked about attached, and it's not accepted, then bring that offer to the auction, because you're already in a position to offer prior. You may as well come and bid on the day. Then in the next video, I'll give you tips on bidding strategy so that you can be prepared. Take a bit of that stress out that people seem to be fearful of because they've watched a few too many auction shows on TV and seeing buyers in panic mode. That's usually just from a lack of preparation. We can help you with that preparation. Until next time, thanks for listening in to another useful information for buyers and sellers from PRD Nationwide, Newcastle and Macquarie.